Hey everybody, my name is Abby and this is Sunny D Writes. Today's video is a bit of a request that I got from somebody in the comments on my last video asking me to talk about my writing process. So here it is. The very first step in my writing process and in most other people's writing processes is to get my initial idea. And I do that using kind of a different method, I guess. Most of the time my writing ideas start off with character concepts. So I'll get an idea for one character, and then from there I'll get an idea for another character, and then I'll think about world building and how everything like that could interact. And then it's pretty easy for me to come up with story ideas from there. For example, a story idea that I'm playing around with right now, but not currently writing, is centered around a boy named Theo Cooper who has anterograde amnesia, which means that he can't form any new memories. This character was the very first thing that led me to the idea for the story that I have now, which I'll probably get into once I actually start working on it so I can tell you guys about it more fully. So once I have the initial idea, I head into the brainstorming phase. And I mean, y'all know what brainstorming is. It's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, I start off with the character idea that I have, and then I create a document or something on either my computer on Google Drive or on my phone, and I just kind of write down all my ideas from there. I've somehow gotten into the habit of getting ideas at about 3 a.m. that'll wake me up from whatever dream I'm having, and I have to write them down and somehow remember what I wrote down in the morning. As a general rule, I tend to limit myself to only working on 3 projects at a time, so the length of the brainstorming phase kind of varies. As of right now, I am working on 2 novellas and a build your own adventure kind of story, and so anything else that I have in terms of ideas is currently in the brainstorming phase, and it's not going to get any farther until at least one of these projects is in the hands of my beta readers. So the brainstorming phase can consist of a lot of things for me, but usually it's just writing down ideas and any kind of developments that come from those ideas. My character bank, which I talked about in the last video, which I will leave up in this card right here, is also a part of that, so I will come up with a character idea and stick it in the bank for now and then just kind of reference it as I go. Brainstorming can also be little tidbits of the story, like this conversation here, or I think this bit of dialogue would sound cool, or maybe this is a plot point somewhere, or I want this to be a part of my world building. So then once I'm done working on the brainstorming phase, I head into development, which consists of a lot for me too. It usually takes about a month or 2 for me. This is when I take the time to take all of my characters and make them a little bit more dynamic, figure out how they're going to interact with each other, what each of their character arcs are going to be, and all that. I also take the time to develop my world fully and figure out everything that led up to this story and then the story itself. What I usually like to do in terms of developing my plot is keep it a little bit more open-ended but still have a general idea of where I'm going. So I'll write down what I want to happen in the main plot, and that part's usually pretty detailed, but my subplots are usually more open-ended. And then once I have all that written down, what I like to do is take little pieces of paper or flashcards or something and write down all of my plot points so that I know exactly what I want to do. And then I color code all of those little pieces of paper, noting which one is for the main plot, which one's for the subplot, which one is for character interactions, blah blah blah. And then I tape them up on my wall to reference which ones I want to write in which order. Because they're taped up, I can usually change around the order pretty easily, and it's really easy for me to step back and look at everything as a whole. For my main project, Reset Point, which I'm working on the second draft of now, I actually have that whole plot thing which I just described to you on the wall right over there, and I use that to reference as I'm going through and rewriting and figuring out which scenes need to be where. It's for this reason that I consider myself a plantser, somebody who kind of plots out my stories but doesn't need to know every single detail. So what I do is I kind of write out a super general thing of what I want to happen in each scene, and then everything else that's in that scene, as long as my goal happens, is decided by me as I go. So then once I have everything on my plot board or my plot wall, whatever it's called, once I have it up there, then I take a week or 2 to leave it alone and then mess with it a little bit and then leave it alone and see what needs to be added, removed, moved around, etc, etc. And then it's time to write. As a general rule, my first drafts take me between 1 and 2 months, but that's because the 2 first drafts that I'm working on or have written recently have been my novellas, which are between 20 and 40,000 words. Now is the time that I take to get my story down as fast as I can. As long as it's following my outline, then I'm pretty happy with it. What's important to me during my first draft is just getting my story down. The details come later in editing, the rewrites, line edits, etc. I am what they call a chronic underwriter, so all of my drafts are usually about 50 to 70% of the length that I actually want them to be. So then I take my rewrites and my line edits to kind of bulk everything up and add the dimension that I want my stories to have. Which takes us to the rewrite phase. Well, kind of. In between my first draft and my rewrite, I take a couple weeks to let my first draft sit and then to read through it again and take any notes or anything that I've noticed that needs to be changed around. Yeah. And then we get to the rewrite phase, which is pretty much just me taking all these notes and rewriting my first draft, as the name would imply. This is usually time that I take to focus on making everything consistent, working on character development, making sure that all of my scenes are needed and are written the way that I want them to be written. This one definitely takes a lot longer for me because I'm taking a lot more time to pay attention to detail and to make things the way that I want them to be. So I would estimate that my rewrites usually take me between like 3 and 4 months. Don't they? Yeah. And the rewrites are as far as I've gotten taking any project seriously, or taking any large project seriously, I should say, because short stories I usually go through the same thing. But in terms of large projects, after I finish the rewrite, the plan is to let it sit for a little while again and then go in and do line edits to make sure that all of my descriptions are where I want them to be and they're what they need to be for the reader, and just to make sure that everything flows smoothly. Then from there, I take it to the beta reader process, round 1. I get all of their feedback and then I go through and include all of that. I'm not sure how long it's going to take because it all depends on the kind of feedback that I get. And so after beta reader round 1, I let it sit for a little while and then I throw it into beta reader round 2. And I would anticipate that those are going to be smaller developments, things like maybe change this paragraph or things like that, but you never know. And from there I would edit it again and then let it sit again, and then I would do the final line edit of my own, and then I would send it off to the professional edit, and then I would call it a day. So my one takeaway from making this video is that editing is always a lot more than people think it is. When I, for example, first got into the writing hobby, business, whatever you want to call it, I always thought it was write the first draft and then edit it one time and then you're good to go for publishing. But it's really not. Even though I'm only on the first rewrite for this project, Reset Point, the amount of work that I'm putting into the editing phase is so much more than I ever put into writing the first draft. And it's almost more than I put into developing the story in the first place, because now I know exactly what I want the story to be. So, to my lovely commenter who asked this question, thank you so much for requesting this video, and I hope this answered the question that you had. I know that you asked specifically about what it's like to be a plantser, and I know I kind of touched on that a little bit, but if you want, I could make a video explaining that a little bit more in depth, or where I could just describe my plotting process, or whatever works. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much to everybody who watched it and made it to the end. If you have any questions, or follow-up comments, or any requests for videos that you'd like to see in the future, don't forget to leave those in the comments below or over on my blog at Sunny D Writes, which I will also leave linked down below. If you liked this video or if you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe and drop a like on this video to let me know. And if you found this video extra helpful, or if you liked it a whole lot, please do consider donating to me on Ko-Fi, which I will also leave linked down below. And until next time, happy writing!